She said I was just a boy, and maybe I was, until the night her walls fell, and she finally looked at me like a man. I met Elena on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day that feels too quiet to change anything. She walked into our office like she didn't need anyone to notice her, which of course, made everyone notice her. There was something about her calm, the kind that doesn't demand attention, it earns it. She wasn't loud or glamorous. Her beauty was quieter than that, mature, practiced, almost disciplined. The kind of woman who's long since learned to hide how much she feels. Her hair was tied back loosely, strands falling around her face whenever she looked down at her notes. And when she looked up, her eyes didn't dart, they studied. She was introduced as a consultant, here to help modernize operations, whatever that meant. To me, it meant more meetings, more reports, and one more reason to stay late. When I shook her hand for the first time, I noticed how steady her grip was, confident, not cold. Her perfume was faint, but warm, sandalwood, with something floral underneath, like jasmine trying to hide behind something stronger. For a second, I almost forgot to let go. She smiled politely. Not flirtatious, not distant, just professional enough to remind me that whatever I was thinking, I shouldn't be. "You're one of the junior leads, right?" she asked, glancing at my ID card. I nodded, trying to sound casual. "For now," I said, "but I'm hoping to get promoted before you decide to replace us all." She smiled again, a tiny, knowing curve of the lips. "Ambitious. That's good. Just don't mistake it for experience." There it was, the invisible line. She'd drawn it gently but firmly, and somehow I wanted to cross it. The rest of the day, I caught myself watching her, the way she adjusted her glasses when she read, how she spoke with quiet authority that didn't need volume. When she laughed at someone's joke, it was soft and short, like she didn't want anyone to get too used to it. And maybe that was the first thing that got to me. Not how beautiful she was, but how guarded. Like she'd built a world that didn't have space for surprises anymore. I told myself it was nothing. Just curiosity. Just admiration. But when she brushed past me at the coffee machine and said, "Excuse me," in that calm, even tone, I realized I was already memorizing the way her voice sounded when she wasn't trying to impress anyone. That night, I caught myself thinking about her. How she seemed both unreachable and strangely familiar, like a memory I hadn't lived yet. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe I really was just a boy in her eyes. But from that first glance, I knew one thing. She wasn't going to leave my thoughts quietly. After that first week, I started to notice patterns, hers mostly. Elena always arrived early, before most of the team. She'd settle into the same chair, a cup of black coffee in hand. Eyes already focused on her notes before anyone had even turned on their screens. It wasn't intimidation, it was composure, a kind that came from years of being the most reliable person in the room. I tried not to look her way too often, but I failed miserably. Every day, I'd catch myself studying how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear before speaking, or how she paused mid-sentence to choose her words carefully. Like everything she said mattered, even the smallest things. It started small, a comment here, a joke there. She'd asked for help with the office printer once, though I'm sure she could have figured it out. Then, during a team lunch, I made a sarcastic remark about how corporate meetings should count as cardio. She laughed, genuinely this time, and I caught a glimpse of something that wasn't guarded. Something playful. "You're too young to sound that cynical," she said, still smiling. "Maybe," I replied. "Or maybe I've just been paying attention." She looked at me, eyebrows slightly raised, the corner of her mouth still curved. It wasn't flirtation, not yet, but it was something warmer than formality. That was the beginning of our small conversations, harmless, easy, but threaded with something I couldn't quite name. Late afternoons would stretch longer than they should, filled with talks about everything but work, books, travel, old music. She'd mention a song from the 90s, and I'd pull it up on my phone, pretending I didn't already know it. "You weren't even old enough to remember that one," she'd tease. "Maybe not," I'd say, "but I can still appreciate good taste." She'd laugh softly, shaking her head like I was impossible. There were moments when I could swear I caught her studying me, too. Quick glances that disappeared the second I met her eyes. Once, while reaching for a folder on her desk, my fingers brushed hers. Just for a second. But I felt it, a warmth that lingered longer than it should have. She didn't move her hand right away. Neither did I. The air between us changed after that. It wasn't tension, Not exactly, more like awareness. Like we'd both realized this friendship of ours was balancing on something unspoken. Still, she kept her tone light, her words teasing. And I played along, even when it stung a little every time she called me kid or boy. Because beneath it, I could feel it, a quiet pull neither of us wanted to name yet. And every time our conversations ended, they didn't really end. They followed me home, in her voice, her laughter, and the way she somehow made silence feel like company. It happened on a Thursday evening. One of those nights when the city felt tired, when even the streetlights seemed slower to wake. Most of the office had already gone home, but Elena was still there, surrounded by files and the low hum of her laptop. I was about to leave when I heard her sigh, a small sound, but heavy enough to make me pause. I glanced through the glass wall of the conference room. She looked human in a way I hadn't seen before. Her blazer hung off her shoulders, her hair had loosened, and the usual sharpness in her posture had softened. Outside, the sky was already breaking into rain. I noticed her glance toward the window, then at her bag. No umbrella. I hesitated at the doorway. You waiting for it to stop? She looked up, surprised to find me still there. Oh, I didn't realize you were here. I was hoping it might slow down. I held up my umbrella, half smiling. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. For a second, she hesitated. Then she nodded, closing her laptop. All right, but only because I'm tired of pretending I don't mind getting soaked. We stepped out together into the dim corridor, our footsteps echoing in rhythm. Outside, the rain was steady, not harsh, but enough to fill the air with that cool, earthy scent that always feels like nostalgia. I opened the umbrella, and she stepped closer, not too close, but close enough that her perfume mixed with the smell of rain. Our shoulders brushed. She noticed. I could tell by the quick breath she took, but she didn't move away. We walked in silence for a while, just the sound of raindrops on the fabric above us. Then, quietly, she said, "You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who used to believe every problem could be fixed if you just tried hard enough." Her tone wasn't teasing. It was soft, like she was speaking to a memory. Was he wrong? I asked. She smiled faintly. No, just younger. The words lingered between us, not as an insult, but as a truth she wished wasn't true. When we reached her car, she turned to me, a few strands of wet hair framing her face. Thank you. You didn't have to walk me out. I shrugged. Maybe I just like excuses to walk in the rain. She laughed quietly, shaking her head. You really don't make it easy to keep my guard up, do you? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The way she looked at me, just for a moment, said enough. There was warmth there, and something she didn't want to admit. When she drove away, the streetlights reflected off the rain, painting everything gold and uncertain. And I stood there, realizing that something had shifted, not in her words, but in the space between them. For the first time, she hadn't seen me as a boy. Not entirely, anyway. The next few days felt different, not just for me, but for her too. After that night in the rain, something had changed. I couldn't name it, but I could feel it in the way she looked at me, or didn't. Before, she'd greet me with that half smile she used to hide amusement. Now it was just a nod. A polite, careful nod that said we shouldn't. Our easy rhythm was gone. The conversations that used to stretch past reason now ended at the surface. She avoided the break room when I was there. Emails came short, stripped of her usual warmth. When I knocked on her office door one afternoon, she looked up with professional calm, as if the rain had never happened. Hey, I said lightly, trying to sound casual. I was wondering if you wanted to grab lunch. You haven't escaped your desk in 2 days. I'm fine, she replied. Just a lot on my plate right now. Her tone wasn't cold. It was protective, like she was building a wall as she spoke. I lingered a moment longer. Did I do something wrong? Her pen froze mid-note. Then she sighed softly, setting it down. No, you didn't do anything wrong. I waited, but she didn't look at me. Then what is it? I asked quietly. She finally met my eyes. There was kindness there, and something heavier behind it. You're a good guy, she said. And I like talking to you. Probably more than I should. But you're young. You still think the world bends when you push hard enough. Her voice softened, almost a whisper. I can't afford to forget that I'm not. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence like static. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that it wasn't about age, it was about feeling. But she was already retreating. I need to focus, she said, forcing a small smile. Let's just keep things simple, okay? I nodded, even though it felt like agreeing to forget something impossible. As I turned to leave, she said my name, softly. I looked back. Her expression had softened again, the kind of look that could undo a man if he wasn't careful. Don't take it personally, she said. It's just better this way. I smiled faintly. If it's really better, why do you sound like you're trying to convince yourself? She didn't answer. Her eyes dropped to her desk, and that was the last real moment we shared for a while. Walking back to my desk, I felt a strange mix of pride and loss. Pride for not begging, and loss for what she was too afraid to name. That night, her words replayed over and over. You're still just a boy. But I couldn't stop wondering. If that were true, why did she look at me like she wanted to believe otherwise? It was nearly 2 weeks before we spoke properly again. By then, I had forced myself to accept the distance she wanted, or at least pretend to. But one evening, long after everyone had gone home, I saw her car still in the parking lot, lights off, rain pouring hard against the glass. At first, I thought maybe she was just finishing paperwork, but something about the stillness felt wrong. I hesitated, part of me afraid to intrude, the other afraid not to. I tapped gently on her window. She looked up, startled, eyes red, mascara faintly smudged. She quickly wiped her face and rolled the window down a few inches. What are you doing here? She asked, voice low and tired. I could ask you the same, I said softly. You've been sitting here for 20 minutes. She sighed, leaning back. It's nothing, just one of those nights. But I could tell it wasn't nothing. The way her hands gripped the steering wheel, the faint tremor in her voice. She was unraveling quietly, and I didn't want her to do it alone. Come on, I said. There's a coffee shop down the street still open. You don't have to talk. Just sit somewhere warm. She hesitated, long enough that I almost gave up, but then she nodded. We sat across from each other in that near-empty cafe, the sound of rain muffled by glass. She wrapped her hands around her cup, not drinking, just holding on to the warmth. After a long silence, she said, I got a call from my ex-husband tonight. He's getting remarried. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. I thought I was over it. I should be. But it's strange, you know? Realizing someone's finally happy without you. I didn't interrupt. I didn't reach for her. I just listened, really listened. When she finally looked up, I said, it doesn't mean you lost anything. It just means you both stopped pretending you were meant to stay. She smiled faintly, almost sadly. You talk like someone who's lived twice his age. Maybe I've just watched too many people give up on things that could have been saved, I said, or hold on to things that shouldn't have been. Her gaze lingered on me then, not assessing, not guarded, just seeing. There was a quiet acceptance in her expression, like she was realizing something she'd been denying all along. After a while, I reached across the table, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Her hand was cold at first, then warm, trembling slightly, not from fear, but release. We sat like that, hands resting together between untouched mugs, and for the first time, silence didn't feel heavy. It felt safe. I didn't need to tell her I wasn't a boy. She could feel it, in my stillness, in the way I stayed when she wanted to push everyone away. And when she whispered, barely above a breath, thank you for not trying to fix me, I smiled. Maybe I wasn't trying to fix you, I said. Maybe I just didn't want you to forget what it feels like to be seen. A few days passed after that night. Something unspoken had settled between us, a kind of stillness that didn't feel awkward anymore. When our eyes met, there was understanding. No chase, no game, just the quiet weight of two people who finally saw each other for who they really were. She started talking to me again, not like before, but softer, with less armor in her tone. And then one afternoon, as the office began to empty out, she stopped by my desk. Coffee, she asked. Just that. One word, a half smile, and a hint of something I hadn't seen before, an invitation, not an excuse. We ended up at the same cafe from that rainy night, but the atmosphere felt different. Warmer, lighter. She sat across from me, stirring her drink even though she didn't add anything to it. The silence was comfortable now, like we'd both learned to breathe in it. After a while, she looked up. You know, I've been thinking about what you said that night. About not trying to fix me. Her tone carried a quiet weight, the kind that makes you put your cup down without realizing it. I wasn't sure anyone really saw me anymore, she continued. People look, they listen, but they don't stay long enough to understand. You did, and I don't know why that scares me so much. I smiled softly. Maybe because it means you still want to be understood. She laughed, a tired, honest laugh, then looked down at her hands. I used to think I was past all that, past wanting someone to see me that way. You reminded me I'm not. I didn't say anything right away. The moment felt too fragile to fill with words. Instead, I leaned slightly forward, my hands resting on the table, close but not touching hers. Elena, I said quietly, I never wanted to prove you wrong. I just wanted you to see that what you call youth, it doesn't mean I can't feel something real. She finally looked up at me. Her eyes, usually so guarded, were soft now, almost uncertain. You're not what I thought you were, she whispered. And that's what terrifies me. The cafe around us faded into a blur, the clinking of cups, the distant hum of chatter. All I could hear was her voice, low and trembling, like she was speaking through her own disbelief. She reached across the table, slowly, hesitantly, and placed her hand over mine. Her fingers were warm this time, deliberate. You made me feel something I didn't think I could anymore, she said. And I don't know what to do with that. I turned my hand over, holding hers gently. You don't have to do anything, I said. Just stop pretending it isn't there. She smiled then, small, but real, and didn't pull her hand away. For the first time, there were no lines between us. No pretense. No fear. Just two people, caught in the quiet honesty of finally being seen, and letting themselves be. It's strange how love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes, it just settles in, quietly, like the sun rising without asking for applause. In the weeks that followed, Elena and I found a new rhythm. We still met for coffee, still talked about everything and nothing. But there was no pretending anymore. The air between us had changed, calmer, steadier, like a long breath finally released. She didn't look over her shoulder when we walked together. I didn't overthink every glance. Whatever we were becoming didn't need a label. It just was. One evening, she called. Her voice sounded lighter than usual. I've been staring at spreadsheets for 6 hours, she said. Save me from myself. Go for a walk. I smiled into the phone. I thought you didn't mix work and after hours. Maybe I'm learning to bend the rules, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. We met near the park, just before sunset. The sky was brushed in gold and amber, the air cool but soft. We walked slowly, our hands brushing now and then, neither of us making it into a gesture, just letting it happen. After a while, she said, You know, I used to think being with someone younger would mean having to teach them everything. Turns out, you've been the one teaching me. I laughed gently. What could I have possibly taught you? She glanced at me, eyes warm in the fading light. How to feel again. How to stop protecting myself from something that was never trying to hurt me. We stopped by the lake. The water reflected the last of the daylight, rippling softly, like the moment itself didn't want to end. She leaned against the railing, her shoulder brushing mine, and for a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, I'm still scared. About what people might say. About how this looks. I turned to her, smiling faintly. Then let them talk. They don't know what this is. She looked at me, eyes searching. And what is this? I hesitated, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to say it right. It's real, I said simply. And that's enough. Her expression softened. Slowly, she leaned in, resting her head on my shoulder. Her hair brushed against my neck, and I could feel her exhale, a long, quiet sigh, like she'd finally stopped holding her breath. We stayed like that as the world dimmed around us, the hum of the city soft in the distance. No promises, no confessions, just presence, steady, unspoken, true. When she finally whispered, You're not a boy, I smiled, closing my eyes. I know. And for the first time, it didn't feel like I had to prove anything. She saw me, completely, finally, and that was all I'd ever wanted.